go an abbreviated version of this, and I'm here for the whole afternoon. If you have questions, ask your questions, okay? But here's what's kind of cool. I've got 4 lobsters in front of me. 2 of them are females and 2 of them are males. There's 4 different ways to tell the difference between a male and a female lobster. Shout it out if you know at least one of them. No, not you. I'm teasing you, Kelly. What the width of the tail, okay? The width of the tail is one of it. The second one is the roll on the inside. That's everybody knows that when you crack it open. And what's the other one? The swimmers, yeah. The 2 swimmerettes at the top are soft on a female, a little rigid on a male. Makes sense? But there's a 4th way.
The claws.
The biologists have explained this to me, and I didn't know this. And I've been doing lobster for a long time. But here's what's kind of cool. If I take this female and I turn her upside down, I can see her swimmerettes, right? The 2 top tentacles are soft on a female, versus if it was a male, like this is a male, but you see how narrow his tail is and see how wide her tail is? The wider the tail, always a female. The narrower the tail, always a male. Make sense?
Yeah.
Childbearing hips, getting it? Okay. The other part is this. If you take your finger and you put it on her dorsal fin, like on her tail, and you go up and down, it's soft, right? Versus if you take the male and you turn it upside down and do the same thing, look at the hooks. See the hooks that they have? On his tail, he has hooks. And the purpose for the hooks is just to defend himself. Because they're always swimming, right? They're always at the bottom of the ocean. Picture them, they're all at the bottom of the ocean, looking for food, looking for something to eat. And their tail is always up in the air to hold their balance, because there's as much wave action on the bottom of the ocean as there is at the top. When you take a bowl of Jell-O and you jiggle it, it jiggles on the bottom too, right? So it's the same thing. So as they're down there and their tail's up in the air and they're crawling around, they're looking around, right? You get it so far? Have I got your attention so far? Right? And all of a sudden, her tail's always up in the air. It's about 6 o'clock at night. She's had a glass of wine or 2. Get where I'm going here? Okay. And he's been working hard all day. He's at the tavern, actually. Comes back from the tavern. Her tail is up in the air, nice and sexy up. And she's swimmeranging. Look, her little swimmerettes are going up and down. You got it? Then all of a sudden, he arrives and it's chicken. You get it? Right? That is not at all what really takes place, but it tells for a great story. I mean, I had you hook, line, and center there. If they're capable of doing that, then I'm converting to a lobster. I always wanted to come back as a cow because they lounge around all day. It's my style. But now I want to be a lobster. But really, it's not the way it works. So here's how it works. The female lobster is the only one that chooses her mate. She decides who she's going to mate with, not the boy, okay? Do you know how she does that? Where's my lobster expert at? Do you know that one?
The size of the claws?
No. Size does not matter. Size is just a suggestion. No, I'm just kidding. Has nothing to do with her claws. She will pee on his face.
Oh, that's attractive.
It's a bit like goats. You know how goats will pee on their beard to make themselves smell and attractive to the female? You didn't know that happened either? That is true. If you're a farmer, that's true. Stay away from the male goat because he stinks. So basically the same thing happens. The female will pee on his face. Then he gets the signal. She'll do it 2 to 3 times before he finally clues in. He is a man, after all. It takes a bit of time. But that is how he mates. That is how she chooses her mate. And then they'll mate, but they don't mate for life. It's one, thank you, ma'am, have a nice day. And then she goes her merry way. Here's what's really cool. I picked on you guys about the width of the tail and the childbearing hip tails. But guess what? The childbearing hips is a great idea, and it's wonderful, but here's even better. She can keep the sperm of the male in her uterus for up to 6 months. She'll lay those eggs when she's damn ready to lay those eggs. It's as simple as that. And why is that? is because she will only lay her eggs when she's in a safe environment, nestle around the rocks or hiding. You know, you often see lobsters that are, like, these lobsters are South Shore lobsters. They're very sandy. They're not from the shore, these particular lobsters. They must be a little further out. I'm not 100% sure, but that's my guess. When you see a lobster that's all black and blue, you know, it's black, blemishes, or whatever, we often refer to them as rock lobster. They're actually lobsters that live on a rocky shore. So they get pushed by the waves and slammed into the rocks. Same as a human, we get black and blue, right? Same thing happens to the lobster, just so you know. All right, so now they've had babies. She's gonna lay eggs. She lays her eggs. A female always has eggs in her belly, ready to lay, because she only lays when she's comfortable to lay. And how many eggs would you say she lays when she lays? On her tail. Would you venture a guess? 1,000, yes, but how many thousands? Do you have any idea? Anybody want to take a guess?
3,000.
3,000, higher. Anybody else? 30,000, higher. It's higher than 30. Yeah, the average size lobster. Now, a smaller lobster might lay 30, but the average lay is 58. That's the biologist's sort of count so far. She'll lay up to 50,000 eggs plus. But if there are larger lobsters, she might lay 80,000. It all depends. But here's the cool part, not very cool because we would think it would be better, but how many of those will actually live to become this size?
3.
6.
Close?
Yeah.
6.
They give or say 5 or 6 is the average. Yeah. So just so you know, the eggs are actually food for other species and so on. But a 1-year-old lobster that is opened up and lived is no bigger than a quarter. It's no bigger than this. So of course it takes time. And a lobster does exactly like a snake. It loses its shell completely, like a snake, and it grows a bigger shell. So they do the same as we do. We lose a bit of weight, we buy smaller pants, and we move on. We just keep growing. But as they get older, they do that less and less. So instead of every year, they'll do it every 3-4 years, because it takes a lot of effort to lose their shell. But here's what's cool. You know the lobster meat itself, the shell? When you open the shell, you see the red pigment on the meat, you say, oh, this is so gorgeous. Do you realize that the red pigment is the neck shell? So what happens when it's molting season, you'll notice you'll open the lobster itself and you pull it out, and there's a little bit of a membrane that's on top of the meat. The meat is smaller, and there's a little bit of a raincoat, it looks like, texture. And then the shell. So that is the red pigments that she or he released to get out of the shell and be able to have some protection as they eat other shells to build the calcium to become nice and strong. They are full. At the colder the water, the fuller the lobster. Is there a difference between a male and female? From a taste perspective, anybody? How many of you go to the market and say, I want a female lobster because they're sweeter? Really? Never heard of that before? Well, it's very common. So if you go to any lobster pond, they'll say, a lot of the older people will come and they'll ask for a female lobster because they feel it's sweeter. There is absolutely no difference in the meat between the male and the female. We've tested this over and over all around the world with all kinds of chefs, and never anybody been able to identify one or the other. And the only reason is the roe. Otherwise, they're identical. Does that make sense? All right, so they laid eggs, so we'll bring them to the shore, we throw them in the pot. First, we catch them in the trap, you know that hole on the side? The only way, sorry, I should have taken a closer look. Too suggestive there. But the only way the lobster can get in that trap, well, lobsters can't swim forward, right? They cannot swim because their claws are too heavy, right? They'll just keep doing this as they swim forward. So lobsters thread water backwards. They scoop water and get away this way. So they can scoot into the hole, but they can't get back out. Does that make sense? Yeah. And the prey that they're teased to smell to get into the hole is in a different chamber from where they fall as they go. So otherwise, one lobster would eat all the bait and it's over with, right? So that is how we catch the lobster. Bring it to shore, and then we have this really funky tool, and it's called a measurement and a banner, basically. So we will take the rubber bands and put them on these reverse pliers that you put against the claw, and you twist and pull, and the rubber band stays there for safety, of course, so nobody gets hurt. Because it gets pretty nasty. If you get a good sized lobster and it's pinching you, you gotta play dead like a snake, and then they release it, but it's still, your instinct is to pull and it hurts, okay? They will kill you with this claw. Oops, sorry, I'll go it this way. They'll kill you with a crusher claw. They'll rip you apart with the actual other claw, and they eat you right in here. This is where their mouth is, right in the front, just like that. Does that make sense? So that is what happens. They'll measure them, they'll come to shore. Once they get to the lobster boat, we take this measuring tool, we measure from the corner of the eye to the bottom of the body. It has to measure 3 5/8. If it's less than that, it goes back. If it's more than that, it can be kept. Makes sense? And what happens next is if a female lobster has eggs on her tail, it's a gentleman's agreement in the fisherman world that they throw that back because it's a producing female, if you make sense. Got it. All right, so you've got all that. We bring them to shore, and then we size them up. They go from chicks. A lot of you would remember them as canners, for example. So a canner is now called a chick. So get into the new world. Okay, we don't can them anymore. There's one cannery left that's actually canning. The rest is all cryovac. Right? So chicks is what we send to the factory to take the meat out. How many pounds of lobster in Nova Scotia do we catch every year? Nova Scotia now, not just South Shore. Would you venture a guess? Where's my expert?
100 million.
100 million. Close, but triple that plus. Yeah. Over 350 million pounds a year just in Nova Scotia. It represents billions of dollars. Billions of dollars to our economy. It's wonderful. All right, so we've got some of those facts, right? So now we're going to cook them. So to cook them, you could steam them, you could boil them, you could just rip them apart and cook them if you want. If you're a little more cruel, you could do that if you want. It's up to you. Keep in mind that if you're a steam lover or a boil lover, the length of time that you cook lobster will determine whether it's tough or not. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right, so are you giving me my time? Thank you. So quickly, so you boil, let's say we'll use boil for now, you boil it, make sure that your water comes to a boil. If you have access to ocean water, use ocean water. If not, 1 cup of salt for every gallon or 4 liters of water. It's that much salt. You want the salt to taste like the water from the ocean. Simple as that. And that'll make a difference in the cooking of your lobster. Put them head first, submerge, remove those darn rubber bands. To do that, all you do is crisscross, pull them on both sides, plunge head first. Lobster will die right away, and it cooks away. Make sure you count your minutes. Some people say, how long does it take to cook lobster? 20 minutes, guys? It's not 20 minutes, it's actually 12 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes for a 1 pounder, for example. But you gotta count the minutes from the time it starts to reboil. Because if you put them in cold water, in hot water, it takes too long. If you put them in cold water and boil it with the cold water, they will drown before they die. Well, they'll eventually die if they drown, but you know what I mean? And the minute a lobster dies, it starts to decompose right away. Unlike a human or unlike anybody else, the inside meat just starts to deteriorate. Okay? I'm gonna go through quickly on how to remove the meat, and from there we're gonna get the show going, okay? So I got a couple males, a couple females, as you can see. We're gonna keep making it pretty. I'm gonna go through this beautiful girl here. Let's go. So first up, you remove the claws. Easy. Did you hear that? Get ready, it's gonna get worse. Then you twist the tail, just like that, and you pull. Make sense? Then you end up with these 4 pieces in front of you. The tail is the easiest one to get out. Now, a lot of people will go and cut the tail in half, rip it open, and eat it. Well, that black line that you have in the middle is shit. Don't eat that. Okay, so you want to remove the vein. So here's how to do it. Put it in the palm of your hand. It's that simple. Look, all you do is crush it. Make sense? Then you turn it upside down and you peel it. Just like that. And just like that, you take the whole tail, jiggle it a little bit, and take the whole tail out. Does that make sense? Okay, easy. Now, if you're an enthusiast, you will take the fins and you will eat it like you do the small claws. We don't have time to do that today. Next up, I'm going to take the back of the tail and pull it backwards, just like this. And as I do, I reveal the actual, it's going to make a liar of me here. Did I pull it the other way? Okay, there's a vein right there in the middle. In this case, it's a seasoned lobster. That means it's been either in the water for more than 2-3 days in captivity, therefore everything is empty, which is the best one, right? And you could wrap it back up and serve it like this if you want. And there you go, you have your meat. Next up is the body. The body, you just remove the actual little legs on the side, push them aside, and these little legs are full of meat. All you have to do is bite at the knuckle.
Or use a rolling pin.
Or use a rolling pin if you're more mature. But, and then you have a little bit of meat dangling out. Every one of these claws are full of meat. So as kids, you let them loose on all the little legs, because the more they eat, the more big meat there is for you. Okay? So that's that. Then you have this body. So the body is very simple. Put your thumbs inside, pull it forward like this. Give it a good yank. And when you do, you end up with all this roe and tamale. Got it? So the roe is the eggs of the female. The tamale is the pancreas and the liver. It is not what you think it is. Okay? Then you end up with this body in your hand. And then inside, you have left the brain. Do not eat the brain. 1 out of 10 people will get deathly sick if you eat the brain. That's where the toxins gather. Unfortunately, our water is not as pristine as it used to be. Okay? So avoid the brain as much as possible. And if you're doing a bisque, cut the brain out, take it out. Okay? It's the best advice that I can give you. The front, remove the mouth, which is the crust in the middle. Then you end up with this piece of cartilage. Just open it up, just like that, in half. And when you do, remember there was 4 legs on each side? And the 2 big claws in the front, they're all attached to the body. So therefore, the body is full of meat. So this is the meat from one, there it is. So that, for example, is what's inside one cavity of a small leg. So if you're throwing the body out for all these years, look at all the lobster you're throwing out, okay? And when you're home, the best way to do this is to put it in your mouth piece by piece, eat all the meat around the cartilage, and throw the cartilage out. Make sense? All right, last up is the claws. The claws like this, bends forward, right? Apply pressure against it, like this. Get yourself a nice, not a brand new knife, but get yourself a shittier knife, right? Something that's dull a little bit, and use it. But look, 3 incision. 1, and click it a little bit. 2, do the same. And then the claw, all you do is this, twist your knife. You heard that? And when you twist your knife, you end up with the claw, right? Then you pull the finger or the thumb, whatever you want to call it, and crack left, crack right, go left to right, pull forwards towards you so that the little claw sticks, turn it upside down, and there's your claw.
I've been crushing mine with knuckle crackers.
Exactly. So this way, it all comes out all in one piece, and it's so easy to eat. Does that make sense? But remember where you crush the actual knuckle. That's the part that's always hard to get out. So all you do is twist that open, push that little piece of meat right out with your thumb, right? And you could just pull that little piece. And then here, what you do is use your finger, and you could pull the meat right out. Use your finger all the way through, your smaller finger, and you could push the knuckle piece of meat right out. And you haven't hurt your hands whatsoever. All right? Best way to eat lobster in the world is cold dipped in hot butter. Some of you love hot lobster, and if you do that when you're home, make sure you cook your lobster, put them in your crisper upside down in your crisper overnight. If you're cooking it ahead of time, put put it upside down like this so all the juices stay in the lobster and not escape, because they breathe obviously through their body, and that's what they'll extract all their juiciness, right? So put them this way and make sure you ice bath them after you cook them. Out of the fridge, right in. Questions?
So when you're transporting, you get them live.
Yeah.
You're transporting them a couple hours to family live.
Yeah.
Just put them in a box. Like, is there any special instructions for that?
So the question is, how do I transport them before they're cooked live, and you're taking them to friends or so for a couple hours or 4 or 5 hours or whatever it is? Your best bet is to wrap them in cold newspaper, right? And ice on top of the newspaper. Put your cover on and you're fine. Yeah, should work. Anybody else? I didn't do that good a job. So just so you know, I teach this around the world to all the chefs and educate chefs on how to use our product that we have here. So that's sort of what an ambassador in our case do. But this course usually, when we do it with students and when we do it with chef, is 3 hours long. So I'm doing like a condensed version here, okay? Any other questions from anybody at all? Going once? Yeah? No? Twice? That's great. Yes?
Oh, so when they're too small to keep and you throw them back in the ocean,
Yes.
do you take the rubber bands off first?
There's no rubber bands
There
then.
hasn't been any.
No, they do the measurements before, and they'll sort them that way, then they'll start banding them. Yeah, sorry, I did say that they band them first. I apologize. Anybody else? All right, let's get this show on the road. Thank you very much for coming, folks. We're going to have a blast.